It happened on a Tuesday. And I remember because I had just gotten the email. Full ride. State University. 4 years, tuition covered, room and board included. My name at the top of the letter, bold and clean. I was sitting at my desk when my brother knocked. And for 1 second, I thought maybe he'd seen it. Maybe he'd say congratulations. Instead, he looked at the screen, said nothing, and walked back out. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the driveway with a garbage bag of clothes and no explanation that anyone would listen to. The scholarship was gone. My name had been removed from the award, and every person in that house believed I had done something I never did. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I picked up the bag and I started walking. What nobody knew was that my neighbor had been watching from her front porch the whole time, and she had already started making calls. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end in that driveway. We lived in a small town outside Knoxville, Tennessee, the kind of place where everyone waves from their truck and nobody locks their doors, but everyone also knows your business before you've finished living it. Our street had 6 houses, 2 oak trees that had been there since before any of us, and a church at the end of the block that my mother treated like a second home. From the outside, we looked like a family worth admiring. My father coached youth baseball on weekends. My mother organized the church potluck every 3rd Sunday of the month. My brother had an easy smile and the kind of confidence that made adults trust him immediately. And me, I was the quiet one, the reader. The one who spent Saturday mornings at the library and came home with stacks of books my mother said were going to ruin my eyesight. I never minded being overlooked. I learned early that there were 2 lanes in our house, and I was in the slow one. My brother, 4 years older than me, had been the son of my parents' universe since before I could form memories. Not in a cruel way, not at first. Just in the way water always flows downhill, naturally, without thinking. When he broke his arm at 13 falling out of the oak tree, my father took 2 days off work to sit with him. When I had my appendix out at 9, my mother dropped me at the hospital entrance and said she'd be back after she picked him up from practice. The nurse who checked me in held my hand instead. I told myself it was just how families worked. Some kids got more, some got less. It didn't mean anything about my worth. I read that somewhere and I believed it for a long time. My brother wasn't openly cruel to me. That's the part that makes it harder to explain to people who didn't live inside it. He wasn't the villain in any obvious story. He was just always slightly ahead, always positioned between me and whatever warmth was in the room. When I made the honor roll, he mentioned at dinner that his coach had called him a natural leader. When I won a regional writing competition in 9th grade, he announced the same evening that he'd been offered a part-time job at the hardware store. My parents talked about his job through dessert. My certificate sat on the counter and nobody moved it except me when I went to bed. I stopped expecting acknowledgement. I started running instead. Not from anything, just through the neighborhood early in the mornings before anyone was awake. The air in East Tennessee in the fall smells like wood smoke and wet leaves, and there's a particular quiet before 6 a.m. that felt like it belonged to me. Like those minutes were the only ones where nobody was measuring me against someone else. I ran, I studied, I stayed small, and I applied to every scholarship I could find. The Hargrove Academic Excellence Award was the big one. A full 4-year scholarship given by a private foundation to 1 student per county each year. You had to write 3 essays, submit 2 teacher recommendations, and complete an in-person interview. I had been working on my application since junior year. I rewrote the first essay 11 times. My English teacher, who had been teaching for 30 years and didn't give compliments unless she meant them, read my final draft and told me it was the best student essay she had read in a decade. I submitted everything in February. The interview was in March. By April, I had the letter. I didn't tell my family right away, not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted to sit with it alone for a little while. I wanted to feel it in my body before it became something that had to exist in relation to everyone else. I sat at my desk and read the letter 4 times. Then I folded it and put it in the front pocket of my backpack. My brother saw the email notification on the family computer 2 days later. I had forgotten to log out. He didn't say anything to me. He didn't say anything to our parents either. Not right away. What he did instead was much quieter. The Hargrove Foundation accepted applications through an online portal. I had created an account with my school email. What I didn't know was that my brother had watched me type my password once, the previous fall, when I was checking my application status on the living room computer, and he walked through without me noticing. I've gone back over that moment many times. I didn't think anything of it then. He was just passing through. But he remembered. 3 weeks after I received my acceptance letter, I got a second email. This one from the Foundation's administrative office. It said they had received a message from my account withdrawing my application and declining the award. It said they were sorry I had chosen not to accept and that they hoped I would consider reapplying in the future. It said the award had been transferred to the second-ranked applicant. I read it standing at the kitchen counter. I read it twice. Then I went to my room and sat on the floor because my legs stopped working correctly. I called the Foundation immediately. The woman on the phone was kind but firm. The withdrawal had come from my portal. It had been submitted with my login credentials. It included a note, written in a voice that didn't sound like mine, saying I had decided to stay closer to home and didn't feel the scholarship was the right fit. They had already notified the second-place recipient. The process was complete. I asked if there was anything I could do. She paused for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm so sorry. Once the award is transferred, we can't reverse it." I hung up and sat very still. The second-place recipient was a student from the other side of the county. I didn't know them. It wasn't their fault. But I kept thinking about my 11 drafts, my interview, my English teacher's face when she handed back my essay, the 30 years of teaching and the best she'd read. I went downstairs and I told my parents. What happened next is the part that still lives in my chest when I think about it late at night. My mother listened with her arms crossed, the way she crossed them when she was already deciding what to believe before the conversation was over. My father looked at me and then looked at my brother, who was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of iced tea, calm as weather. "I didn't withdraw anything," I said. "Someone accessed my account." My brother shook his head slowly. Sad. Disbelieving. Why would anyone do that? "I don't know," I said, and I looked at him, and for 1 second, something crossed his face. Not guilt exactly, more like the recognition that I had seen it. "You've been stressed," my mother said. "Maybe you did it and forgot." I didn't forget. I have the acceptance letter. I was accepted. Someone went into my account and withdrew for me. My father set down his coffee cup. "Who would do that, sweetheart? Who even knew your password?" I opened my mouth, and then I closed it, because the answer was sitting at the table drinking iced tea, and I had no proof. Nothing except the knowledge of one careless moment in the fall when I hadn't noticed him walking through. No screenshots, no evidence, just the thing I knew in the way you know something. When you've grown up in a house with someone and you understand exactly how they move through the world. "I think it was my brother," I said. The kitchen went very quiet. My brother put his glass down. He looked at my parents with an expression so carefully calibrated to wounded confusion that I almost doubted myself. "Are you serious right now?" "She's upset," my mother said. "Not to me, to him. She's just upset." "I worked on those essays for a year," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. I earned that scholarship. Someone took it. And I think it was him. My father stood up. He had the kind of stillness that preceded anger in our house, the calm before the door slammed. "You are accusing your brother of something serious. You know that." "Yes." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that no one else knew my password." "You don't know that." "I do know that." My brother shook his head again. Slower this time. He looked almost sorry for me. "I don't know what's going on with you lately," he said. "But this isn't okay." My parents believed him. I watched it happen in real time, the way their bodies turned slightly toward him and slightly away from me. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and absolute, the way tides move. You don't see the water shift, but suddenly you're further from shore. By that night, the story in our house was that I had withdrawn my own scholarship in a moment of anxiety, panicked, and then tried to blame my brother when I regretted it. My mother called it a breakdown. My father called it irresponsible. My brother said nothing more, which was worse. I tried for 3 more days. I called the Foundation twice more. I emailed them with my acceptance letter attached, asking if they could check the IP address of the withdrawal request. They responded politely that they didn't have the technical capacity to provide that information and considered the matter resolved. I talked to my school counselor, who listened carefully and then said without evidence there was very little she could do, but that I should consider reapplying next year. I talked to my English teacher, who believed me immediately, completely, and said so in a way that made me cry in front of her for the first time since second grade. She said she would do anything she could, but there was nothing concrete to do. On the fourth night, I came downstairs to get water and heard my parents talking in the kitchen. My father's voice, low. She needs to take responsibility. My mother, she's always been like this when things don't go her way. And then a pause, and my father again. Maybe some time away would do her good. Let her figure things out. I went back upstairs. I sat on my bed. I understood what was coming before it came. It was a Saturday morning in May. The kind of morning Tennessee does perfectly, warm and green, birds working hard in the oak trees. I was in my room when my father knocked once and opened the door without waiting. "I need you to pack your things," he said. I looked up from the book I wasn't reading. "What?" "Your brother has been offered a position in Nashville. He's moving in 3 weeks. We've decided to convert your room into a home office." He said it the way people say things they've rehearsed. "Flott. Even. You're 23. It's time. You're kicking me out. We're asking you to find your own place. There's a difference. Where am I supposed to go? You're an adult. You'll figure it out." I sat there looking at him. My father, who had coached Little League for 11 years and knew every child's batting stance on the team. My father, who cried at the end of Field of Dreams every single time. My father, who could not look me in the eye right now. "Did he ask you to do this?" I said. "This is a family decision." "Did he ask you to do this?" He left without answering. The door didn't slam. That was somehow worse. I had 4 hours. My mother came in once to ask if I needed boxes, in the same voice she used to ask if I wanted more potatoes at dinner. My brother didn't come in at all. I could hear him moving around downstairs, the sound of his voice on the phone, easy and unhurried. I packed what fit into my car. Books, clothes, the folder with my original acceptance letter, which I kept because I didn't know why. Only that it felt like evidence of something, even if I didn't know yet of what. When I carried the last box out, my neighbor was sitting on her front porch. She was 71 years old and had lived in that house for 44 years. She had known me since I was 4. She was a retired records administrator for the county court system, which I mention because it matters later. She watched me load my car. She didn't say anything until I was almost done. Then she called across the yard. "Where are you going, honey?" I told her I didn't know yet. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Come have some coffee first." I almost said no. I had nowhere to be, but I felt the particular humiliation of being seen, the embarrassment of someone witnessing the version of you that has just been set out with the boxes. But she was already standing, already holding the porch door open, and something in her face was not pity. It was something more like intention. I went inside. Her house smelled like lemon furniture polish and old paperback books. She poured coffee and set a plate of shortbread cookies on the table and sat down across from me. Then she said, "Tell me what happened." So I told her. All of it. The scholarship, the withdrawal, the IP address I couldn't access, my brother's carefully arranged expression of wounded confusion, the 4 hours to pack my room. She listened without interrupting. She didn't make the face people make when they're deciding whether to believe you. She just listened, the way someone listens when they're also thinking. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The Foundation's portal. Would it have logged access times and locations?" I blinked. "I don't know. They said they couldn't provide that." "They can't provide it to you," she said. "But if someone filed a formal complaint alleging unauthorized account access, the Foundation might be required to preserve those records. And if it became a legal matter, those records could be subpoenaed." I stared at her. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I spent 31 years in the county court records office," she said. "I know what documentation looks like, and I know what requests have teeth." She paused. "I also know your brother. I've been watching that family for 20 years. And I've been watching you since you used to sit on my porch and read your library books at age 7. She looked at me directly. "I believe you." I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until it landed. She didn't move fast. She moved carefully, which is different and better. Over the next 2 weeks, while I was sleeping on my friend's couch across town, my neighbor made a series of calls. She contacted a friend who was a retired civil attorney. Together, they drafted a formal letter to the Hargrove Foundation requesting preservation of all access logs related to my account, citing potential unauthorized access under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The letter didn't threaten litigation. It simply made clear that records needed to be preserved pending a possible complaint. The foundation, faced with a formal legal letter, did what institutions do when they receive formal legal letters. They preserved the records, and then, because the request had opened a process, they reviewed them. The withdrawal request had come from an IP address registered to our home network. Not my laptop, a different device. Submitted on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:14 p.m. I had been in school until 3:30 that day. My brother had called in sick to his part-time job. The foundation's director called my neighbor's attorney friend directly. The conversation was brief. There was a process for situations where fraud could be documented. It was rare, but it existed. I didn't know any of this was happening. I was working a double shift at a restaurant downtown, saving enough to cover my first month's rent on a studio apartment, trying to figure out how to feel about the fact that my parents hadn't called once. My mother had texted twice, once to say my mail was piling up, and once to ask if I had taken the good throw blanket by accident. I hadn't taken the blanket. The call from my neighbor came on a Thursday evening when I was sitting in my car eating a sandwich before my shift. She said, "I need you to contact the foundation tomorrow morning. Ask to speak to Director Calloway. Tell him you're following up on the access log review." "What access log review?" I said. "The one they've been conducting," she said, and I could hear something careful and satisfied in her voice. "Just call him." I called at 9 the next morning, standing outside the restaurant before it opened, the early June air already thick and warm. Director Calloway answered himself. He asked me to confirm my name, my application ID, my date of birth. Then he said, "Miss, I want to first apologize on behalf of the Hargrove Foundation. It appears your account was accessed without your authorization, and a withdrawal was submitted fraudulently on your behalf." The street noise continued around me. A truck drove past. A bird landed on the power line above my head and looked at me. "We cannot reverse the award," he said. "The recipient has accepted and made enrollment decisions. But we can offer you priority consideration for our supplemental emergency scholarship, which has a different funding source, and we are prepared to issue a formal letter confirming that your original application was tampered with. That letter can be used with university financial aid offices and for future scholarship applications." He paused. "We are also obligated to report the unauthorized access to the relevant authorities. We've been in contact with local law enforcement." I leaned against the brick wall of the restaurant. My legs were doing the thing again where they stopped cooperating. "Is there anything else you need from me?" I managed. "Just your current mailing address," he said, "for the official documentation." I gave him my friend's address because I still didn't have my own. The police visit to my parents' house happened on a Friday afternoon. I know this because my mother called me for the first time in 3 weeks. She didn't ask how I was. She said, "There are officers here asking about your brother." "Okay," I said. "Did you do this?" "Someone stole my scholarship," I said. I reported it. The silence on the line was long. Then she said quietly in a voice I didn't recognize, "He told us he had nothing to do with it." "I know," I said. "He told me the same thing." I hung up. My brother wasn't arrested. The situation resulted in what the attorney friend explained to me as a civil matter rather than a criminal one, in part because no money had changed hands and in part because these things are complicated. But his name was attached to a formal report. The foundation sent a letter to his employer, who ran a background check as standard policy. He lost the Nashville position. My parents, when they finally understood what the documentation showed, could no longer arrange their faces into the expressions they had been wearing. Some things, once seen clearly, cannot be unseen. My father called me 6 weeks later. He didn't apologize right away. He started with logistics, the way men sometimes do when emotions are too large for the room. He said my remaining mail was there if I wanted it. He said my mother had packed up a few more of my things. He said the throw blanket was there. He'd seen it in the closet. Then he stopped. And in the silence, I could hear something I had never heard from him, something that had no comfortable name. He said, "I should have listened to you." 6 words. after 23 years. I held the phone for a moment, then I said, I know. We didn't talk for long. I wasn't ready for long. But it was a door cracked open, and I decided to let it stay that way without deciding yet whether to walk through it. My neighbor threw me a small housewarming gathering when I finally got my apartment. Just her, my English teacher who had driven 40 minutes, my friend whose couch had saved me, and a woman from the restaurant who had become something like a person I could call when things got hard. My neighbor brought shortbread cookies. My English teacher brought a card that said, in her cramped handwriting, the best essay I ever read came from the best student I ever had. Don't let anyone tell you differently. I put the card on my windowsill where I could see it when I woke up. The supplemental emergency scholarship covered my first semester's tuition. I enrolled in January, later than I'd planned. I had to take out loans for the rest, and I work weekends, and some months are tight in the way that makes you very familiar with the price of everything. But I have a desk by a window that gets morning light, and a coffee maker that was $3 at a garage sale, and a running path along the river 2 blocks away that I take before the rest of the city wakes up. The air in Knoxville in the winter smells like cold stone and river water. There's a bridge on the path where I stop sometimes and look down at the current. Everything moves, even when it looks still. I thought being pushed out would be the thing that broke me. Instead, it turned out to be the thing that showed me exactly what I was made of. The foundation letter, the attorney, the access logs, all of it mattered. But what mattered first, what made everything else possible, was one 71-year-old woman on a porch who said, "Tell me what happened," and then listened like she meant it. I didn't need my family to see me clearly. I needed one person who already did. My brother and I don't speak. That's not a dramatic declaration. It's just a door I've left closed, and I find that some mornings I walk past it without thinking about it at all. The gap is getting smaller. The days without wait are getting longer. I run farther now than I used to, down the river path and past the bridge and into the part of the route where the trail bends, and you can see the mountains on clear mornings, blue and steady on the horizon. I am still the quiet one, but quiet is different now. It is an absence. It isn't the sound of making myself small so someone else can take up more room. It's the sound of knowing what you're worth and not needing anyone to confirm it before you believe it. They thought pushing me out would end my story. It just made me the one holding the pen. If you've ever had someone in your life decide for you who you were allowed to be, drop a comment below. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more of them, and they all end with someone still standing.